Hi Steve, please make yourself comfortable.
Thanks, Dr. Rock.
How can I help you today?
Well, Doc, first of all, I should tell you, I host a YouTube channel and it's called Rock and Metal Invasion. And I've been wondering recently, am I a poser? I'm not even sure I know what a poser is, but maybe I am a poser. Here's the thing, back in the 80s, yes, Doctor, I am that old. Back in the 80s, some of the guys who like thrash, well, most of them would say guys like me who liked, the more melodic metal that I suppose we might now call hair metal. Well, they'd call guys like me posers. So even then I was wondering, am I a poser? Because back then I didn't really like thrash metal, but I did think I liked heavy metal. Sure, these days you might call it hair metal or glam metal, but it's still got metal in the name. And actually, to be honest with you, they didn't just call us posers. There were other names as well, but they're even more offensive. But here's the thing, back in the 80s, if you like bands like Def Leppard, Motley Crue, even Poison, you could still say you like heavy metal. And I think that's where the poser tag originated, because you were saying that you like heavy metal, but actually what you really like is pop. Sure, it has some guitars, but what you really like is music that was pretending to be metal. It wasn't real metal. Manowar certainly didn't help by putting Death to False Metal on the booklet for their Fighting the World album. And it's gone on to become one of their catchphrases. But here's the thing, I like bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, and it seemed to me at the time like they were metal, they were considered metal. So I wasn't a total poser, if that's what I was. I remember back in the 80s, if I was asked what kind of music I like to listen to, I wouldn't just say heavy metal. I'd say hard rock and heavy metal. Because I didn't think, even back then, I was necessarily a metalhead. And maybe some of the bands I liked were more hard rock. But there were definitely some of the bands I liked that were heavy metal. And back in the 80s, there were really only two genres, hard rock and heavy metal, as far as heavy music is concerned. I mean, these days, there are so many subgenres, you know? And I mean, yeah, you've got hair metal, which we talk about these days, but that's not even really a genre. Anyway, the term poser, it's still used now. For example, if you wore an Iron Maiden t-shirt, but you've never actually heard the band or heard one of their albums, you might get called out as a poser, which kind of makes more sense to me than being called a poser just because you like hair metal. Like I said, it does have metal in the name. And I'm not pretending to like heavy metal. I just like what I like. But some people, well, they like to consider themselves the gatekeepers to metal. And, sometimes these people aren't very inclusive. these days it's not even just hair metal. Sometimes that's not called real metal. These days you've got, I mean, there's so many subgenres: new metal, metalcore, symphonic metal, rap metal, industrial metal. The list goes on. And a lot of these subgenres are often not considered real metal. It almost seems like it's, unless it's, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, or maybe even bands like Venom or Slayer, it's not real metal. Come on. I'm sorry, Dr. Rock, but I've even said on my channel before, no one has the keys to the kingdom of metal. Everybody's welcome. Although we probably don't really need any Swifties. Just saying. But it's not the music you listen to that can make you a poser. It can also be what you wear. Like if you're wearing a band's t-shirt and you've never actually heard the band. I remember, well, when I was about 10, I had an Iron Maiden t-shirt. Had the Troop on it. Really cool t-shirt. But this was before I'd even heard the band or got into the band or even, got interested in hard rock and heavy metal. So, I guess you could say, as a 10-year-old, I was a poser. But that doesn't really count. And really, is it a big deal? Someone wears a t-shirt because they like the t-shirt design? They think it's cool? But they haven't heard the music. Maybe you shouldn't do it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to call someone out on it. I've actually seen some videos where people go up to people at concerts and they look at the t-shirt that they're wearing and they'll say they're wearing a Motorhead t-shirt. They'll say, name 3 Motorhead songs. And often they can't. I don't know, maybe they just like 1 or 2 songs. Maybe they just heard the album once or twice. And, sometimes I think if people are going to a heavy metal concert, then they think, okay, I'm going to a heavy metal concert. I'm going to have to wear a heavy metal t-shirt. But, you've got to be careful doing that because you might get called out. Now, once I did get into hard rock and heavy metal, I made sure if I wore a t-shirt, of a band, it was a band I liked. And it was a band that I had listened to. I had their album. I enjoyed their music. Same with posters and any other kind of merch. I actually remember one of my favorite t-shirts that I had back in the day was a Skid Row t-shirt. And on the t-shirt, it said, Big Guns. And in typical, hair metal style, it had a lady with big breasts and she's holding a gun. Which I'm pretty sure was not what the song was about. I think the guns was like a metaphor and it's guns plural. She's only holding 1 gun. Anyway. So, another thing I remember, my very first concert. I actually, for my very first concert, I went to see Anthrax. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't really that big a fan of Anthrax. But I did make sure, before I went to the concert, that I had heard their new album. In fact, I went out and I bought their new album, Persistence of Time. Gave it a good spin before going to the concert. So, I knew some of the songs, but I didn't know any of their songs prior to that album. Anyway, I had a good time, enjoyed the concert. But while I was there, I bumped into this guy from school who I didn't know that well, but, I knew him. And when he saw me, he was like, hey, Steve, I didn't know you liked metal. And I thought, uh-oh, do I like metal? Because like I said, I wasn't really a big fan of Anthrax, but I did like Motley Crue, Van Halen, Bon Jovi, you know, the poser bands. So he goes to me, hey, what kind of metal do you like? Which I thought was kind of a weird question, you know, not like what kind of bands do you like? What kind of metal do you like? So I just sort of said all sorts, which I thought was true. But he just laughed at me and walked away. I think he thought I was a poser. Now, Dr. Rock, you might not think that's a big deal, but that happened over 35 years ago, and I still haven't forgotten about it, which is maybe why I'm here today. But, I don't want anyone to feel bad about the bands they like. If they want to wear a t-shirt because they like the t-shirt, you know what? I think that's okay. What about me? What about me, Doctor? I host a show called Rock and Metal Invasion. But do I bring the metal? Or should it just be called Rock Invasion? I know there's probably some people who come to my channel, they visit it, they watch it, and they're like, what? It's just a whole lot of, pussy poser music. Well, I'm not going to call my channel Pussy Poser Invasion, am I? Yeah. I don't talk about a lot of death metal or thrash metal or any other types of extreme metal. But I still cover metal, and I definitely cover the rock. So what do you think, Doc? Am I a poser?
Well, have you asked anyone?
That's a good question. Maybe I should ask. Maybe I should ask people on my channel. Am I a poser? Thanks, Doc. You've been really helpful.
No problem.
I will come and see Dr. Rock again. By the way, you're not related to Bob Rock, are you?
No. And our time is up.
Okay. Thanks.
Come in, Simon. How can I help you today?
I have an unhealthy hatred for a band,
What band?
Winger.